Ciao ragazzi, buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, buonasera, benvenuti al nostro 14º video, I think. Welcome to our 14th video, if I'm not mistaken. I've lost count of the days, the weeks, the months, and of course of the videos by now in this quarantine. But believe it or not, I still know what topics we have covered. So by extension, I also know what we're still needing to cover. So today we are going to talk about a new set of verbs. But don't worry too much because you will see quickly that these are not particularly difficult. You only need to learn a small table and you'll be done. They're called verbi riflessivi, which means reflexive verbs. Let's look at one normal verb at first. Svegliare. Svegliare. Yes, it has that peculiar li sound right in the middle, right? Svegliare. And this means to wake up. This is just a regular are verb, which means we follow the pattern we already learned, right? In order to conjugate it, we do away with the last three letters and then we add the endings we know for are verbs. So the conjugation would go io sveglio, tu svegli, lui sveglia, noi svegliamo, voi svegliate, loro svegliano, right? I wake up, you wake up, he wakes up, right? And you will notice, I hope, that this verb is like mangiare, meaning that when you get rid of the last three letters, you're left with an I at the end of the stem, right? So if you add the normal endings, you would double the I for a couple forms, and we do not double the I, right? Basically, we do only one. That's one special rule that I taught you for regular verbs that have a stem ending in I, right? But this is just a normal are verb. You apply the pattern, right? And it means to wake up. So let's look at a little picture, right? So there's a guy sleeping, right? And then his clock is ringing, right? His alarm, but he's not waking up. So his friend comes in, a nice roommate that he has, of course, anytime before social distancing, and he comes and shakes him, and he wakes him up, right? So one of them wakes the other up, right? In this case, you would use, of course, in Italian, the verb svegliare, right? So let's give them a couple names. Let's say that Marco is the roommate and Luca is the guy that is sleeping. And we want to say that Marco wakes Luca up. So we would say Marco sveglia Luca, right? Why sveglia? Well, again, this is a regular are verb, right? So you get rid of the three last letters of the infinitive. You're left with the stem, which is svegli, and then you add the ending for lui, because it's he that wakes up the other guy, right? So Marco sveglia Luca. And you would say this in English, Marco wakes Luca up, right? And if you recall, what we did last time, or part of what we did last time, was think about subjects of actions and direct objects of actions. So if you think about this a little, you will notice that here we also have a subject and a direct object. We have someone who's doing the action of waking someone up, and we have someone else who is being directly affected by that. He's being woken up, right? So who wakes up the other guy? Marco. Marco is our subject. Who's the direct object? Luca is, right? Okay, that's the normal use of the verb svegliare, to wake up. Let's look at another instance of waking up, however. We have this little girl, this bambina, right? In English, you would say that she wakes up, right? That's what you would say. The girl wakes up. But in Italian, this would change a little. You wouldn't say la bambina sveglia. You would say la bambina si sveglia, which you could translate if you want to talk, if you want to be specific, if you want to be literal in your translation, you could translate this, la bambina si sveglia, as the girl wakes herself up. That sounds a little weird, a little forced in English, right? I wake myself up. That's, you just say I wake up, right? But if you think about it, that is what you do when you wake up, right? Unless, like our guy in the other picture, you need some sort of alarm or even a friend to come shake you, right? Because you're not able to wake up yourself. But if you wake up yourself, well, you wake yourself up, right? You are the subject of the action of waking up and the direct object as well. You do the action, you're also directly affected by the action. Does that make sense? These verbs in which the person that does the action and the person that is affected by the action are one and the same are called reflexive verbs. In Italian you would say svegliarsi, right? That means to wake oneself up. It's the action of waking up when you are the one that does the action and you're also the one that is affected by the action. So today we're studying reflexive verbs. Again, reflexive verbs are the ones in which subject and direct object are the one and the same, right? Perhaps waking up is not the best verb to use for this. So in English, so I've thought of other examples. Because in English, when you want to talk about reflexive actions, actions in which subject or direct object are the same, you use the pronouns that end with the word self. What do I mean? For example, he embarrassed himself, right? This is a reflexive action, right? I don't know, he forgot to wear pants to school, whatever. So he entered the classroom with no pants, and he was embarrassing somebody. Who? Himself, right? He does the action of embarrassing, and the victim of that embarrassment is himself. So it's a reflexive action. The second one, I hope, is even clearer. She teaches herself Italian, right? She has no teacher, no professor, no classmates. She just has a book, right? Or maybe even does Duolingo, and she teaches herself. She's her own teacher, right? So she's the one doing the teaching. She's also the one being taught. So in English, you would say she teaches herself, right? Or a third example, right? Sorry, I've been watching too many zombie movies in this quarantine, right? So they save themselves from the zombies. Right? No one else comes and saves them, right? They do the saving and they themselves are the ones saved, right? They save themselves. So I hope these three little examples make it clearer, right? That they show you more explicitly what I mean when I say that there's an action in which the person that does the action and the person that is affected by the action are one and the same, right? A more extreme example I'm not going to put in the slide. I hit myself, right? Like in Fight Club, right? That movie that probably you guys are too young to have watched, but there's this scene in which the guy literally beats himself up, right? With his own fists. It's quite funny actually, right? He hits himself until he knocks himself out, right? He's the one doing the hitting. He's also the one being hit, right? That is a reflexive action. It's called reflexive because it sort of reflects back into the one that does the action, right? So actually the name makes sense. So we just saw that in English for reflexive actions you use these pronouns that end in self. Himself, herself, myself, yourself, themselves, right? In Italian we have a different structure. We use a special infinitive and a new set of pronouns for these verbs, right? So before we go to the specific rules, I want to remind you of what the infinitive is. The infinitive is the form of the verb in which no one is actually doing the action. You're just referring to the action in general. Like when you say in English, to play. Who's playing? I don't know. I just want to talk about the action, to play, right? In Italian, how would you say to play? Giocare, right? So we said that in Italian, the infinitives always end in are, ere, or ire, right? In are or ere or ire. Well, the infinitives of reflexive verbs are slightly different. They don't end in re, they end in rsi. Remember the previous slide where we did svegliare, right? Svegliare means to wake up. Svegliarsi means to wake oneself up, right? So notice that that infinitive ends in rsi. That's the way that reflexive infinitives end in Italian. Okay? That's the first rule. The infinitives of reflexive verbs are different. And the other rule is that they're conjugated in the same way that we have learned for regular verbs. So no worries about that. But we add a special set of little pronouns, of little words that come before the verb. What exactly do I mean? Well, let's look at some examples. Let's look at this picture, right? This woman is waking up. She's not being woken up by anybody. She's waking herself up, if you will, right? She is doing the action to herself of waking up. So how do you say this in Italian? You say svegliarsi, right? This verb to wake oneself up, how would you conjugate it? Let's look at the conjugation, right? It goes like this. Io mi sveglio, tu ti svegli, lui o lei si sveglia, noi ci svegliamo, voi vi svegliate, loro si svegliano. Okay? If you look at this table carefully, you will see that the column on the far right, which is the actual conjugation, looks a lot like the conjugation of a regular are verb, right? It actually looks the same. The endings are the same. Now the verb is svegliarsi, right? It ends in rsi. And the vowel right before the rsi is an a. So what this a is telling me is that I conjugate this verb like an are verb, okay? I use the are endings. So that vowel before the rsi is very important for reflexives. That's the one letter that tells you what sort of conjugation you're going to use, what set of endings you're going to use. So again, I look at that vowel before the rsi, I see an a, this means I conjugate this like an are verb, okay? That's why I do sveglio, svegli, sveglia, svegliamo, svegliate, svegliano. O, I, a, iamo, ate, ano. Those are, I hope you remember, the endings for are verbs, right? That is the same. What changed? The column in the middle. Those we hadn't heard of, right? Well, those are called the reflexive pronouns. And I put them before the verb. And that is what tells me in Italian that this is a reflexive action. Okay? And notice that the pronouns change depending on who does the action. Mi is for io, ti is for tu, si is for both lui and lei, ci is for noi, vi is for voi, and si is for loro. So the structure of this conjugation goes like this. Subject, meaning who does the action, and then we add the reflexive pronoun and then we add the normal conjugation. Okay? This is the way you conjugate a reflexive verb. Subject plus reflexive pronoun plus normal conjugation. Okay? Let's look at another example, right? So, is this guy waking up? I guess, right? But you could also say that he's getting out of bed, right? We actually have a reflexive verb in Italian that means to get out of bed. Alzarsi. Alzarsi. For the pronunciation, remember that the Z is strong, right? Alzarsi. So it ends in RSI, right? It means this is a reflexive verb. Where's the letter before the RSI? Which one is it? It's an A. So that tells me that I conjugate this verb like an are verb, right? But before the verb, I have to add the reflexive pronouns, right? So how does it go? Like this. Io mi alzo, tu ti alzi, lui o lei si alza, noi ci alziamo, voi vi alzate, loro si alzano, right? This means I get out of bed, you get out of bed, he gets out of bed or she gets out of bed, we get out of bed, you guys get out of bed, they get out of bed, right? That's what it means, right? But in Italian, this is a reflexive verb. Look at the column on the far right. You will notice that I'm conjugating this like any other are verb, right? I get rid of the last three letters, right? In the case of an reflexive verb, they would be four letters because I gotta get rid of the I, the S, the R, and then the A, right? That gives me the stem, and then I add the normal endings. O, I, a, iamo, ate, ano. Okay? But I have to remember that before that, I have to put the reflexive pronouns, right? Depending on the subject, I use a specific reflexive pronoun. So again, the structure is subject plus reflexive pronoun plus normal conjugation. One last example. What is this guy doing? He's shaving, right? If you think about shaving, it is a reflexive action, right? Well, unless you're shaving someone else, right? But typically, you shave yourself, right? So it is a reflexive action, right? How do you say to shave in Italian? Well, radersi, radersi. Radersi means to shave. Now, let's look at the infinitive for a moment. It ends in RSI because it is a reflexive verb, right? So whenever we see an infinitive ending in RSI, we will know it's a reflexive verb. But there's another important detail. What's the vowel before the RSI? It's an E. The two verbs we did before, they had A's before the RSI, but this one has an E. What is this E telling me? It's telling me that I do not conjugate this like an are verb, I conjugate it like an ere verb, right? So, how do I conjugate it? Like this. Io mi rado, tu ti radi, lui o lei si rade, noi ci radiamo, voi vi radete, loro si radono. Okay? That means I shave, you shave, he shaves, she shaves, we shave, you guys shave, they shave. That's what this means, right? Look at the column on the far right again. I'm conjugating this like an ere verb. So notice the lui, lei ending, it's e, not a. Notice the voi ending, it's ete, not ate. Notice the loro ending, it's ono, not ano. All those changes come from what we already know, from the conjugation of ere verbs. How do I know, again, that I conjugate this as an ere verb? I look at the vowel before the RSI, and that tells me that this is an ere verb, okay? But of course, I have also remembered to insert the reflexive pronouns before it, right? So it's mi, ti, si, ci, vi, si, right? Those are the reflexive pronouns. What happens? Let me give you, before I ask this, just the structure, right? Subject plus reflexive pronoun plus normal conjugation. That's the same thing I did in all the other slides. It's just showing you how the structure that you use to conjugate these verbs. But I wanted to ask, what happens if in Italian I say this but without the reflexive pronouns? If instead of saying io mi rado, I say io rado, right? Well, it's an interesting phenomenon because that also means I shave, right? In English, it's sort of the same sentence, but it has two very different meanings. If I say io mi rado, no one's going to ask you in Italian, ma a chi radi, right? Who are you shaving? No one's going to ask you that because it's very clear that you're shaving yourself. But if you say in Italian io rado, they're going to ask you tu radi chi? Who are you shaving? Because if you don't use the reflexive structure, it's not clear who you're shaving, right? Noi radiamo, we shave. You shave who? Who are you? This is weird, right? Whereas if you say noi ci radiamo, okay, you're shaving yourselves. That's okay, that's fine, right? So, in other words, if you do not use the reflexive pronouns, it's not clear that the person receiving the action is the same one doing it. So if you say in Italian, io sveglio, they're going to ask you, who are you waking? Right? But you say, io mi sveglio, that's fine. I wake up. I wake myself up. I hope that makes sense. So if you look at this carefully, and if you paid attention to this explanation, you will already have noticed that you only need to memorize one little set of words in order to learn how to conjugate these verbs. The set is called in Italian I pronomi riflessivi, reflexive pronouns, right? Those are the words that in our previous tables were always in the middle column, right? The reflexive pronouns. Those are the ones that signal that this is a reflexive action, an action in which the person doing it and the person receiving it are the same. How do they go? Well, let's look at them, okay? They go io, mi, tu, ti, lui, si, lei, si, noi, ci, voi, vi, loro, si. I actually recommend that for memorizing them, you learn them the way I just presented them. Not just by themselves, but along with the subject, right? Not just me, but io, mi. Because if you learn it like that, right, it will become just like second nature saying the two words together, which will be very useful because whenever you're talking about reflexive actions in Italian, you use both words, right? You say, well, in most cases, it's much more natural to say io mi rado than mi rado, okay? Good. So for the activity, it's going to be very simple. You already have noticed that both in the Blackboard announcement and in the email you have received, there are two reflexive verbs in the body of the email, right? Or the announcement. Take those two verbs, conjugate them, write a little table like the ones I did for the examples, right? And pay attention, pay a lot of attention to that vowel before the RSI so that you know which endings to use, the are endings or the ere endings or the ire endings, right? So just take those two verbs, conjugate them. As always, you can send me Word files, you can send me PDFs, you can send me pictures, screenshots, whatever, as long as it is readable and it has your name. Okay? Grazie ragazzi, we're almost there. And I think that for the last week of classes, instead of introducing new topics and bombarding you with new information, I'm just going to do a couple review activities, okay? Probably focused on verbs. So that way I will give you a little break for the last week, which I am sure will be very busy for many of you, because I know that many professors are requesting a lot of work from you these days. Okay? So, grazie ragazzi e ci vediamo mercoledì. Ciao ciao.